Hello everybody, my name is Dustin Thompson. I'm with Delaware United. Thanks for watching. I'm here with Laura Sturgeon, who's running for state senate in Delaware. So Laura, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you're running for office.
Well, I'm primarily, I think the way I identify myself is as a teacher. I've been a high school teacher here in Delaware for 23 years and grew up here. My dad was a DuPont engineer, so I grew up in this area right up here in North Wilmington. I was the daughter of immigrants. My mom and dad came from Argentina, and I was born here while they were studying at the University of Florida. We moved to this area when I was 2 years old, and very involved in my teachers union, the DSEA, and I'm interested in anything around advocacy for young people, and my service to my students and to my colleagues has made me interested in sort of expanding that to the constituents of the 4th Senate District.
Great. So what are a couple of the main issues then that you feel like that aren't being addressed with the current representation for this district?
Well, that's a great question because one of the reasons I decided to run for office is I didn't feel represented. And I thought, well, we need to have somebody on the ballot to give people like me a choice when it comes to our state Senate representation. And one of the areas I didn't feel represented in was in women's reproductive rights. That's very important to me. And the history of my opponent isn't very strong in that area. Another area that's important to me is equality. I believe that everybody should be treated equally. I'm in favor of the ERA, the passage of the ERA in Delaware, but then also LGBT rights. I didn't feel represented in that area because looking at my opponent's history, as I did before I decided to run, I found that he had voted against even civil unions and certainly marriage equality. And I didn't think that that really fit with what the district as I know it, as a person who's grown up here and lived here most of my life. What I perceived is what my district would want in their representative. I also didn't feel represented on issues of gun safety. I noticed that that the current senator has a 100% rating with the NRA, and that did not seem to me to be where this district would be.
It's funny you bring that up. So there are several pieces of gun legislation right now, one of them backed by several members of the Delaware GOP. So what's your reaction to some of those bills, and more importantly, how do you think that this district views gun ownership?
Well, I was actually really happy to see that my current senator, I think, co-sponsored one of those bills, the one banning bump stocks. And maybe he's turning a corner on his views on gun safety, and that would be wonderful. But his background, certainly his 18-year voting history, hasn't shown that. Those bills are a good start. I think that they, I'm in favor of all of them. I probably would like to see us go even further. And what I'm hearing at the doors when I'm out door knocking is definitely the people I talk to, which are mostly Democrats and independents, are very concerned about gun safety. And certainly this most recent tragedy in Florida has got many parents thinking about this issue more than ever. And they have told me we need to do something to stop the violence and we need to get guns under control. So it's what I'm hearing is that this is an issue that's important to people in this district.
People want action.
They want action.
All right. So you, as you mentioned, you're a teacher. So you see the struggles every day in the classrooms. So how can we improve on our school funding situation that we have right now to make sure we get more resources into the classroom where they're needed?
I would like to see us move away from a system where schools are funded based on property taxes and having to go out for referendum in order to raise them. I used to work in the Votech school district for actually the first 17 years of my teaching career. The Votech school district in many ways was the envy of the other school districts because they're not geographically bound to any one area. They don't rely on property taxes and never have to go out for referenda, and they get all their funding from the state. Therefore, they're very well funded. The teachers are actually among the best paid teachers, at least in Newcastle County, VOTEC, where I worked. Great benefits. And it seems like a more fair model to have. I would like to see the state directly fund the schools. We're a small state, and I think we can do that. The other thing is I would like to see more resources allocated in the buildings. We need a smaller adult to student ratio in the buildings. And that's not just teachers to students. Certainly it would be great to have smaller class sizes for many reasons. But even building administrators. Because if I'm having problems with a student and they're making it impossible for me to do my lesson because they're just being disruptive, if there's not another adult that I could send them to that can speak to them and they could get to the bottom of what's going on and work with them, then that problem just keeps recurring, day after day.
And that has a lot to do with the vulnerable student population, the
That's
ones
right.
that are troubled at home, that come from poverty. So having those additional resources could really address a lot of those issues for that
Right,
population.
because just sending them out to get them out of the way is certainly, it's not an option.
We need
because
to resolve the
right,
situation.
those students have just as much a right as the others to learn, but if their behavior is preventing others from learning, we need to have the resources in the schools to address their needs so that they can focus and they can be a contributing positive force in the classroom. So I don't know
Absolutely.
if part of your question involves other programs I'd like to see us do in schools.
If you want to touch on a couple programs,
yeah,
great.
well, I am a huge proponent of having as many social programs in the school as possible. Well, certainly the teacher is the first person who teachers need to be trained in trauma-informed practices, restorative practices. I've availed myself of all those trainings because I see the difference it makes. But not all teachers have had access as I have had. I've sought it out through my NEA, training and all that. We need lots of training for teachers, but then we also need resources outside the classroom because the teachers still do need to teach the curricula. And they're very much held accountable for getting through the curricula. They have state test scores that are being scrutinized to decide whether they're an effective teacher or not. So they can't spend all their time on the psychological aspects of their children's lives. But that's where, if we had those resources in the buildings, if we had more counselors, if we had psychologists, if we had more trained personnel, disciplinarians who are there to help students, not just to punish students, we could go so far. And I think the school building is the perfect place to bring all those resources because we have a captive audience. Kids are there, and what's amazing, and over 23 years I've seen this over and over again, the kids with the greatest needs, with the most problems, if you will, the most challenges at home, who sometimes are the biggest pain in the neck for the teacher, are the ones who are almost never absent. Because school is the one place, even though they may squander the opportunity because they've got other things on their mind that makes it hard for them to focus, school is the one place where they can count on caring adults, a structured schedule, they feel safe, and they're there.
Guaranteed 2 meals.
Guaranteed 2 meals.
Sometimes they're only 2 meals.
Exactly. So
we could
helping
talk about
those.
education.
Yeah, all day.
testing.
Obviously, that's my area.
So, but I want to talk to something that is actually a little bit more involved, and you're involved in it right now, and that's open space preservation and green energy.
Okay.
So, what can we do? What can we do to help transition Delaware to a more renewable infrastructure and bring in green jobs in Delaware?
Okay, well, I have a constituent who asked to meet with me. He's been very supportive of the campaign, and he's very involved in this. And he sat me down and explained to me that something that the state is not currently doing and should be doing, and I agree with him, are performance contracts. And these are contracts, or this is a means to an end. We could be taking our state buildings and many schools that are older, that their systems are not updated, that are not very energy efficient in many ways. They're leaky, they're not well insulated, they don't have new systems in place, HVAC systems. if we were to use performance contracts as a way to bring the buildings, the state buildings, schools and other state buildings, to a much higher level of energy efficiency, it would actually be revenue neutral, because the way the performance contracts work is that they pay for themselves. The payment comes out of the savings to the state in terms of energy savings.
A lot of states are moving in that
Lower
direction.
bills.
They're
And
bringing in
it brings
solar
jobs.
programs onto schools,
Right.
libraries, state buildings. Because
Exactly.
Delaware is not unlike a lot of cities where space is limited. So you have a lot of states that are actually investing in this energy efficiency, and even taking it one step further, let's put solar panels in the state
Absolutely.
buildings,
Why
and let's
not?
make some money off of that.
Right.
So,
and
you're-
it brings jobs.
And there's
because
jobs.
we need people to install the new systems, to repair them, to maintain them, to insulate the buildings, etc. So
Yeah.
it's a win-win-win all
And I
around.
want to touch on open space, because
Yes.
I know that you're
Yes.
a little involved in an open space project right now.
Yeah.
So tell me about the Three Little Bakers project here.
Yeah, so when I was out door knocking in Pike Creek Valley, which is a piece of the 4th Senate District, it happened, we were out there door knocking in Pike Creek Valley right around the same time that the current owners of the Three Little Bakers property, a developer, was about to have a town hall meeting. So as we were out door knocking, we thought, well, we can talk about my campaign, but let's also tell people, hey, if you're worried about what's going to happen to Three Little Bakers, if you want to have a voice, make sure you go to the town hall and
Show up and speak
show
up.
up and speak up. Well, then I and a few members of my team also went to that town hall to see what the residents had to say. And we were really disappointed to find that it was actually more of a sales pitch from the developer, telling the audience what they envisioned and their plan they had for over 200 homes. And they really did not solicit audience input on anything other than, do you like plan A or do you like plan B? Both plans involved over 200 homes. And it was set up in a way where the speaker from the development group stood up on stage with a microphone. The people were down below, were not offered a microphone. If they tried to speak, they were scolded and told, oh, excuse me, don't interrupt me, you're being rude, things like this. It was quite the scene, and people left in a group angrily before the presentation had fully ended. They felt duped. I felt foolish for having encouraged people when I was out door knocking to go to this event. I thought it was going to be more of an open forum where everyone would get to be heard. So in talking to residents after that event, it was clear that there was a need for the residents to have their voice heard. And so a few Pike Creek Valley residents decided that the best way to do that was to hold their own town hall, a true citizens-led town hall. And I was more than happy to help them. I connected them with some resources. I spoke to people who had effectively stopped the development of the Barley Mill Plaza area and asked them, how did you do it? What did you do? Who should I talk to? And I networked some, and I shared everything that I learned with the residents, the citizens of Pike Creek Valley. And I've just sort of been behind the scenes trying to encourage them to make their voice heard. And the reason I'm doing that is they're my future constituents, and they certainly deserve to have their voice heard. I believe in the preservation of open space. I believe that deeds are a covenant between the developers of a community and future generations, and that deeds should not be lifted just because someone comes along and wants to make a lot of money off of building new homes. And
Well, it sounds
unfortunately, as a state senator, it's not something I'll be able to vote on, but as a leader, I can teach people what they can do to have their voices heard, and how they can use the political process to make sure their representatives in county council know what they want, and that
And it's not just about
They should be
legislation as a senator. It is about listening to your constituents and giving them the resources they need.
Exactly.
So you're already on that, and you haven't even won the election yet. So that's great. So real quick, we've talked about this before. You've mentioned your passion for getting more people involved and engaged. So there's a lot of bills right now to do that in the legislature. A few from Representative Bentz, one from Senator Brian Townsend that would help increase voter turnout. So
Yeah.
why is that such an important issue to you personally?
Well, I was always privileged to have a job where I would be done by 5 o'clock, and my polling places were open till 8 o'clock, and I could go vote after work. It was a non-issue for me, but not everybody has that. And in Delaware, you're very limited. You pretty much can vote on voting day, and when I put myself in the shoes of someone whose life is different, or someone who maybe runs from one job, has to run home, shower, change, whatever, and then run to another job at night, I'm not sure where in that one day a year that you can vote, they're supposed to find time to vote. And so I think that disenfranchises a lot of people, and that having like a longer voting period and other ways to vote besides showing up at a polling place on one day a year, absentee ballots, mail-in, and there's a longer voting period. Yep. I feel that people are disenfranchised, and I sometimes think that politicians count on that. They count on knowing who they think is going to come out to vote, and that's the people that they represent and serve. And then there's all these people who aren't being represented and aren't being served because they may not have the chance to get out to vote.
Yeah. So last question to wrap this up a little bit. So what do you think are some of the most important issues facing the middle class and the people who are struggling in Delaware? And how can we address those concerns through supporting legislative efforts or advocacy?
So again, what most of the people, well, I would say everyone whose door I've knocked since, we've been door knocking since last June, so we're going on a year now. In fact, I think you might have been at one of our first canvases. Almost everybody, I would say, falls in the range of middle class, from lower middle class to upper middle class, if we can still use those terms. I don't know, but so what I find over and over again, the things that people care about the most so far that I hear are certainly education. They want the public schools to be strong. Most of these people can't afford to send their children to private school, or don't want to have to. They want to know that their public schools are strong, well funded, and will meet their children's needs. So that's one. Health care. Now, I know that one's tricky on a state level, but I'd like to look into what we can do to address it, because there's where I see the most pain. I hear over and over again people say, I don't know what I'm going to do. My son or my daughter is soon going to roll off of my health care, and then what? They don't have health care through their job. With the ACA being gutted, people are afraid. I hear the most fear and worry about the future around health care, probably than any other topic. And so I certainly want to see what we can do legislatively at the state level to help give more access to health care and more affordable health care for people. And those are probably the two things, education and health care, that I hear the most about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us this evening. Thank you all for watching at home.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm sure we will be speaking again. We do have a canvas event for Laura on Sunday, March 3rd. And we have our event up on Delaware United's Facebook page. Please sign up for that and come out and help support this great candidate.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.